Hello. So I thought I'd just come on and relay some thoughts I have about Grey Knights in the current edition of Warhammer 40,000. So it's going to be a very quick video. To literally just, I've been flicking through certain the codex and certain other books that I've got lying around, and generally through different videos on YouTube and different different websites like Bella of Lost Souls, which is a Wretched Hive and Scum and Villainy anyway. But just looking for opinions on Grey Knights, because my current opinion is that we're woefully overpowered, and as anyone knows who watches the channel, is Grey Knights are my go-to. You know, they are my main army. They are the other thing that got me back into the hobby, and you know, always loved them. I've loved their look. I've always loved their aesthetic. I've always loved the fact that they're basically Marines, but if you don't want to go for the bog standard Marine, you can have these really striking looking medieval knight slash, you know, futuristic equivalent of a medieval knight, essentially, in power armor, which I always thought was absolutely amazing. But I have a few opinions on Grey Knights going forward that I think I wanted to share on the video. Now, there are tons of channels out there on YouTube that do this a lot better than I do, so if you're looking to go and get some actually really good opinions, go and watch them. I'm sure they'll be willing to help you out. But this is just my brain fart on Grey Knights and where I think they are right now. As somebody who was working for the company at the time when Grey Knights came out, I can tell you firsthand how they were received and how other things have been received since then, since I've recently left. So first of all, I think the main problem, the main issue with the Codex is the fact that it was made at a time, it was one of the first codexes essentially, so it was made at a time when Games Workshop didn't really have 8th edition down yet. They didn't really know what they were doing with 8th edition. Now, a lot of people say to me, well, they wrote the rules, so surely they would know like what 8th edition is like. Well, there's a big difference between having 100 beta testers going after a game like this, which can be broken in a million different ways, with a million different mathematical equations, and having 11 million beta testers who are breaking the game in a bunch of different ways. The meta in Warhammer 40,000 in any sort of edition does not start to appear until a couple of months after initial release. And unfortunately, codexes like Necrons, like Grey Knights, came out very quickly after 8th edition dropped. I think Grey Knights came out in the August, but I'm not too sure. I think it did come out in the August. These codex release date. Just have a little look here. So I do this. I look at things and I need to know straight away where they came out. Yeah, August 2017. So yeah, when you think about June 2017 was the release of 8th edition, August. So not long. So yeah, the current meta hadn't really been established, and I think the studio team was really over. What's the word? They were giving too much credence to the power of Grey Knights, and you know, they were erring on the side of caution when the Grey Knight Codex was actually made. And the same goes for Necrons as well. Games Workshop was erring on the side of caution. They didn't want to break these new rules straight away. But unfortunately, as the new meta has crept in, as people have played more and more and more games, it's become very evident what is powerful in Warhammer 40,000 8th edition and what isn't powerful. And so, obviously, the brand new codexes have been able to take full advantage of that, as they should do. They've been able to take full advantage and get... well, put it this way, every single codex right now I love. I really do. But the Blood Angels Codex is probably my favourite at the moment. For how I like to play 40,000, in that it is extremely powerful, but it has its weaknesses. It really does have its weaknesses. But if used in a proper way, it can be absolutely fucking devastating, and that is the main thing. That is how things should be. Every single army should be like that. Every single army should have a few glaring weaknesses, yes, but they should also have a few massive strengths that you can use. Grey Knights are actually on that level, believe it or not. Grey Knights are actually already at that level. They are already an army that can be used in a way that can be beneficial to them and that can actually beat other armies. The problem with Grey Knights is, across the board, they're too expensive in terms of points. Every single Grey Knight unit is extremely expensive. Now let me put this into perspective for you. 3 Grey Knight Paladins, anyone who knows what I'm talking about will know what I'm talking about. 3 Grey Knight Paladins are worth more in terms of points than the same amount of Custodes, Adeptus Custodes. And as anyone will tell you, Adeptus Custodes do everything at least twice as good as a Grey Knight Paladin. At least. So, it's one of those things. Sorry about that, somebody just knocked at my door. It always happens at just the worst times, where I was in mid-flow as well. But anyway, so Custodes will generally do twice the job a Grey Knight will do, and they're actually cheaper in terms of points. And now if that doesn't show you where GW were at the time, nothing will. That will show you exactly what handle they have on 8th edition right now. They have got a great handle on what things are actually worth and what things should be able to actually do, because Custodes have quite a few drawbacks. Mainly in the fact that they're still quite expensive. You will still be outnumbered by most armies, and different things like that. But imagine having Custodes who aren't as good as Custodes and are much more expensive, and you literally have what Grey Knights are right now, which is invariably why they are broken. They are broken in the unfortunate worst way. I'm not even going to go into any of the flying rules or any of the psychic stuff. What I will go into is the 50%. It used to be Grey Knights used to be the one thing that was keeping Grey Knights in the fight was the fact that they could deploy everything from deep striking and then deep strike onto the field. That would give them their advantage. Now, even then, they would still be coming up against forces that are, firepower that is able to decimate them in a turn. But being able to deep strike onto the field all at once gives the opponent something to think about. It gives the game a really good dimension of, when are these guys going to turn up. It's sort of really eerie when you're looking at the tabletop and there's nothing on the other side. Especially when it comes to Grey Knights. Because Grey Knights they don't have very many. It was balanced because Grey Knights don't have very many troops on the field at any one time. You had to do a surgical strike to try and get rid of the big parts of the enemy straight away. Sometimes it would work, most of the time it wouldn't, but sometimes when it worked it was glorious. So Grey Knights were still kind of balanced that way, is that they were underpowered and very overly expensive, but they could teleport straight onto the field. Now, with the rules as they are now, 50% of your forces have to be deploying on the field. Now, Grey Knights are still usable that way. You can still have, a couple of Paladin units who are in cover, things like that. But it takes away from what Grey Knights actually are. Grey Knights would not deploy 50% of their forces on the battlefield at the start of a battle. They wouldn't. That's not how they work. It's literally in the law. It's right there. That's not how they work. And they are one of the only armies at the moment who actually go against their nature in the rules, because the rules say this is how you're meant to do it. This is how you have to do it, so everyone's fair. I don't know why, but Grey Knights seem to have been left behind in that regard. Games Workshop seem to have really left them behind, unfortunately. And most of the rules that have been coming out to try and fix the game, I think it's a really good game as it is, but to try and fix it, have kicked Grey Knight squarely in the nuts, unfortunately. But hey, on to my second point. Command point abilities. They're far too expensive. For instance, any sort of shielding ability, any sort of ammunition modifier for Grey Knight is worth 2 command points. On any other army, it's worth 1. Cybolt ammunition, the equivalent of Cybolt ammunition, for instance, is worth 2 command points for a Grey Knight unit to use. Any sort of modifier on any sort of warp weapons for Thousand Suns, anything like that is 1 command point. So it's double the price, essentially. Again, this isn't a vendetta that Games Workshop have. They haven't gone into it and said, screw Grey Knights, we hate Grey Knights, we hate you, Matt Ward, we're going to do this now, we're going to, you know, kick them square in the balls and hopefully no one ever uses them again. It's nothing like that. Games Workshop were not used to the meta of 8th edition when the Codex came out for Grey Knights. And this shows they've really overestimated just how powerful some of these abilities can be. And as the game has gone on and things have settled down, the points values and the values they needed to cast certain things have come down, whereas the Grey Knights, obviously, they only have their Codex, which was made right at the start of 8th edition, and that stayed extremely expensive. If everything else was nerfed the way that Grey Knights are, there would not be a problem at all. Third thing is power armor across the board. This isn't just a Grey Knights problem, this is a problem across the board. Power armor troops are butter right now. With 3+ save and no protection, they are decimated by nearly any type of firepower. But then again, you look at a normal Space Marine unit, or even a Primora Space Marine unit, which has 2 wounds. They can, even a normal Space Marine unit, is cheap enough so that if you lose 1 or 2 units, you're not too bothered. You're not too bothered. They only had bolt guns anyway. You know they're there to soak up most of the heat, so that your big hitters can get into combat. Grey Knights are a lot more expensive than normal Space Marines. Again, we're coming back to that. Grey Knights are a lot more expensive than normal Space Marines. And so when you're losing your 5-man strike squads or your 10-man strike squads to Overwatch and things like that, it hits you square in the chest, and you are losing things that you actually need to win the battle. Again, this isn't just a problem for Grey Knights, this is a problem across the board for Space Marines. I've seen a lot of different solutions thrown my way. You know, Space Marine should be toughness 5, for instance. That would make things a lot easier. It would, but it would also upset a lot of people. There were always people who thought that Space Marines were getting an unfair shake of things and were far too powerful in the last edition, so I think that's being addressed in this edition. Toughness 5 to me does seem better than giving everyone 2+ save, which is another thing that I've seen. I do think that it would be, you could achieve more parity with power armor by giving people different stratagems. So, you know, for a command point, you could give a unit something like existential will or something like that. You know, something named like that, which basically means that they can push the powers of their power armor to the limits to keep them alive, which basically gives them for that turn. For that game, it gives them a 5+ invulnerable save. Yeah, that would make them a lot more survivable, and it means that you're actually paying command points for it. You're not just giving them you're not just slapping 5 toughness on there. But there are more people out there who are saying there should be a rule like that and 5 toughness as well. Which, you know, and then this is the problem Games Workshop are facing. How do you please everyone? You can't. But one thing that is certain is that power armor needs to be sorted, especially in the Grey Knights. Power armor needs to be a lot more powerful than it actually is, and it needs to be able to keep people alive a lot more reliably so than it does right now. Terminators. Terminators, again, across the board, are broken at the moment. They are generally not powerful enough at the moment, I'm afraid. In any way, shape or form. Toughness 4, no. I'm sorry, no. This should be... toughness 5, this should be toughness 6. All Terminators should be toughness 6. I go along with that. I completely agree with that. I've heard that mentioned quite a lot. And to be honest with you, it is something that will give them a lot more survivability. It means that you could drop in your Terminators, and even though they have a 2+ save, and yes, you know, they're going to be worn down by armor penetration, it means that they will be a lot more survivable against heavy hitting weapons. At the moment, dropping Terminators in, they're slow moving. You know, they only move, I think it's 5 inches now, and maybe even 4. They're slow moving. They don't really get into contact with enemy units that well at the moment. And so they need something to balance that out, because at the moment they are next to useless. Unfortunately. Thunderhammer Terminators with the Storm Shield, obviously, always going to be really good. But there should be more options. I mean, I love my Lightning Claws, but at the same time, dropping them in against the Riptide, for instance, or against, you know, the things that they're meant to be taking on, essentially. It's alright for people saying, well, don't charge a Riptide. Well, at the same time, Terminators are made to kill a Riptide. That's what they're meant to do. Paladins are the same. They're meant to go up against big things and try and kill them. If they're dead before they even get into combat, that means they're underpowered. I'm afraid. For the points that you're paying, that means they're underpowered. If I can't even get into combat with Mortarion with my Paladins, because our unit nearby or his unit kills me in Overwatch, or kills 2 or 3 Terminators in Overwatch, and then slaughters me, the second I get into combat, because I'm only toughness 4 or 5, that is underpowered, because my Terminators should be able, not to kill Mortarion essentially, but to really hurt him when they charge in. They should be able to really, really, really juke down his wounds. Not kill him, he's a Primarch, but they should be able to really juke down his wounds. Same with the Paladin unit. Paladin unit should actually be able to kill Mortarion outright, because that's what they do. That's literally what they do. They kill Demon Princes. They're basically Terminators with better demon killing weapons. That would not happen in 8th edition right now. 3 Paladins charging Mortarion would be decimated. One on Overwatch, maybe even 2, and then the other one will slap Mortarion a few times, take off 1 or 2 wounds, and then be decimated. Now, 3 Paladins may be a bit much, but I'm definitely going to say 5 Paladins should be able to take on and kill Mortarion. And in 8th edition right now, they can't, because their toughness is too low, their movement is too slow, and I can't think of something else to rhyme. But those are the main 2 options, and they're too expensive as well, unfortunately. So that's something that needs to be fixed across the board. 5 Grey Knights is Purifiers. Purifiers do a ridiculously low amount of damage for what they are. Essentially, they are the Grey Knight equivalent of Devastator squads, because Grey Knights can't have Devastators, unfortunately. So, but imagine replacing your las cannon with a slightly better flamer. Right, a flamer that's slightly better than a normal flamer. When I say slightly, I mean very slightly. And then up the points cost of that unit. So it's a lot more expensive than a Devastator unit. I think it's something like per Marine 5 points more expensive than a Devastator unit. I think. I don't have the codex to hand, it's behind me, and I don't really want to start flicking through it right now. But I know for a fact that Purifiers are more expensive than Devastators. And they do not do anywhere near the damage of Devastators. And Devastators are kind of overpriced anyway. For what they are, Devastators in a normal Space Marine army are overpriced. Grey Knights, just to put it into perspective and how screwed they are right now, Purifiers are nowhere near as good as Devastators. They've got a much shorter range, and they're more expensive. Need I say any more? Need I say any more? And their damage output is ridiculously low. 1 damage on Purifiers is insulting. Quite frankly, it's just insulting. That is not what Purifiers do. If Purifiers get into range, you have to really work to get your Purifiers into effective range. If you manage to do that, you should be rewarded. If I get my Purifiers into range where they can do some damage, they'll kill a cultist unit, sure. As long as it's below 10 men, they'll kill a cultist unit. They could even kill a Marine squad if they get really lucky. But up against Terminators, up against other, up against Necrons, up against up against Death Guard. Death Guard, forget about it. 5 Death Guard against 5 Purifiers, no. Purifiers are dead before you even, so unfortunately there's something else that needs to be looked at. Purifiers are one of the signature Grey Knight units, and they are woefully underpowered. And that's going to bring me on to one of my last points, and that is general characters. Castellan Crow has next to no effect on Purifiers. He's the leader of the Purifiers. What is this? He has next to no effect on Purifiers. From whenever I've played Purifiers, he does give them an effect. But to be honest with you, it's just, for the points total that he costs, it's not powerful enough at all. Games Workshop either need to bring the power of Grey Knight up to the level of every single other army, or they need to drop the points cost of Grey Knights way down. When you have people, and I have friends of mine who despise Grey Knights because of the old Matt Ward days, and they just can't get it. They just can't get over it. They can't get over the fact that Matt Ward wrote a really broken codex for them 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Even they are turning around and saying Grey Knights are screwed, I'm really sorry about that. Grey Knights are absolutely, garbage. Not because they're rubbish, but because they cost far too much for what they do. If Grey Knights were pointed in the same cost as other armies, like Eldar, for instance, that can field a horrific amount of damage dealing units that are also really, really pliable and malleable in combat, then we would be balanced, you know? 1 second. Just want to double check the purifier. Yeah, again, so yeah, Castellan Crow is nowhere near as powerful as he should be, and that's just one example. I think the only character who makes any sort of sense in the Grey Knight Codex is Khaldor Drago, and that's because there's no way, you know, he could be underpowered, because obviously even at the start of 8th edition they knew Drago had to be a Primarch killer, and even then Drago charging into Mortarion, my money would still be on Mortarion, to be honest with you. So yeah, anything I haven't mentioned is stuff that I'm generally happy with. So Dread Knight, generally quite happy with them, the way that they work. Having a Dread Knight and a Grandmaster also was really nice. Obviously your vehicles, or just your vehicles. Dread Knight should not be vehicles. You know, simply because if a Riptide isn't a vehicle, a Dread Knight shouldn't be a vehicle. Sorry, that's just how it is. You know, if you're gonna take the vehicle, because the vehicle keyword can be extremely detrimental to a unit, especially with things like Harlequins that can take down vehicles in seconds. So yeah, if Riptide is a walker and it's not a vehicle, then neither should Dread Knight be, because Dread Knight is a psychically powered unit. But anyway, I think I've ranted on for long enough. Again, I told you this would be a very raw video, and it has turned out to be an extremely raw video of just me rambling on about Grey Knights and how I think that they should be fixed. They should be fixed, let me just sum up, either by upping the power of Grey Knight units, so that, you know, across the board, so that they're more powerful, so that they do more damage, so that they're more malleable, more durable, and that they are more devastating. That would be one thing that I would do. Number 2, allow all Grey Knight units to deep strike at the start of battle. They are exempt from that 50% rule. You can do it. There should be a rule in the Codex that says right at the start, Chapter Tactics, Grey Knights, you can have all of your units in deep strike reserve, not just 50%. That's something that should come in regardless, because without that, in lore terms, they're broken. They're broken. Grey Knights are not Grey Knights right now. They're just not. They're just Marines with fancier armor. That's literally all they are. That are woefully overly expensive. So that's something that should come in. Is the 50% should be taken away from Grey Knights. They should be able to all deep strike. Number 2, I would do one of two things. As I just said, either make Grey Knights more powerful across the board, so that they can duke it out with more powerful factions that are in Warhammer 40,000 right now, or lower their points cost. I would err on the side of making sure Grey Knight units can actually deep strike completely all the time. I would bring that in. I would make certain Grey Knight units more powerful, like Purifiers, like Paladins, like Terminators, and I would obviously give the Power Armor a bit of a buff across the board, not just with Grey Knights, and I would bring their points cost down. You know, in lore, Grey Knights would be able to fight. A Grey Knight Paladin would be able to fight a Custode. He'd probably lose eventually, but he would give the Custodes a bloody good run for his money, and on a right day would be able to kill him outright. But not in the game. Nowhere near in the game. Grey Knight should essentially be just below the power level of Custodes, but their psychic abilities should be able to make up the difference. So they're basically on the same power level as Custodes. Ideally, in Warhammer 40,000, every single army should be on the same power level. That's what I'm saying. Every single army should be on the same power level, but they should have different strengths and different weaknesses, and you choose based on what that is. At the moment, that is not the case. That needs to be fixed. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll speak to you guys soon.